Hi guys, welcome to today's episode of Bible in a Year. And today we are looking at Genesis chapter 36 to 40. So we start with Genesis chapter 36. Genesis chapter 36 just gives us basically the family of Esau, the history, not the history particularly, but it shows us a societal structural form, how Esau operated his different clans. So Esau has families and different clans, and then he had chiefs over each clan. He gives us the structure. Even if he wasn't the Jacob that was to turn to Israel, he gives us the wisdom that Esau reportedly worked with, that had different chiefs, different structure. He made it very interesting because this is different contracts to Jacob that had just families and everything, had possessions. Esau also had possessions. But we see that the Bible records that he had chiefs over different clans and all of that. Now we move to Genesis chapter 37, where we now have Jacob's son, Joseph, the one whom he loved so much. And he even gave, in this chapter, he gave him coat of many colors and all of that. So Jacob had a dream, and he had two dreams. He shared the first one with his brothers. So he had 11 brothers plus him 12. So he had 11 brothers. He shared his dreams with his brothers. And then they didn't like him because, initially they didn't like him because the father loved him more. And they also did not like him now, more so because he shared a dream that in that dream he says, my own portion of sheep and everything, yours were bowing to mine. He had a second dream, and yet he told his brothers again, and then the same episode of, oh, they don't like him and everything. And then he told his father, and then his father cautioned him from saying these things, and then his father kept it in his mind, noting these dreams. So later on, when the brothers went to tender the flock of Jacob in Shechem, now Jacob says, oh, Joseph, go and check up on your brothers and make sure they are okay, whatever, just bring back messages and everything. Now Jacob sent his son Joseph to go check, and then his brothers saw that he was coming from afar and plotted against him to kill him. However, Reuben interceded and said, let's not kill him so that the blood will not be upon us. And then they decided to, first of all, keep him in a pit where there was no animal, nothing, just in a pit. And then Reuben left or went somewhere else. And then the brothers saw that, you know what, let's not kill him like we agreed, but let's sell him. And they decided to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelite, company of Ishmaelites that were coming from Gilead, and with camels, they were going down to Egypt. So they sold him to Ishmaelites. And then from there, they went back to Jacob. Already when Reuben came back, and then his plan was to rescue Joseph. But when he came back, he saw that Joseph had been brought out of the pits, and then he went back to his father. They all went back to his father with an animal's blood on the coat of many colors that Jacob gave to him, telling Jacob that he was dead. And Jacob mourned so much that he was, in pain. Now back to Egypt, where Joseph was sold. So Joseph was sold to the Midianites, and then the Midianites sold him to Potiphar. Now, Potiphar was an official of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. So he was now in the kingdom of Egypt. Now, in chapter 38, we see a diversion from Joseph now, in that chapter, to now Judah, one of the sons of Jacob. Now Judah departed from his brother, where he visited Adullamite, whose name was Hira, and then also saw the daughter of a woman whose name was Shua. So he got married to that daughter, and then the woman, the wife of Judah, gave birth to three sons: Onan, and then Shelah. Onan, and Shelah. So got married to one woman, and then Tamar, that's the wife of now, is Tamar. So what happened was that was wicked before God, and God struck him, and then he died. Onan was the second child of Judah. Now, instead of Onan to get married to her and procreate, and whatever children he gives birth to would become that of his brothers, but he didn't want that. So what would happen is that whenever he went into Tamar and sleeps with her, instead of releasing in her and putting a seed into her, he puts the seed on the floor, releasing on the floor. God saw that it was wicked, and then God struck him, and then he died. So what Judah did was tell Tamar, go back to your father and become a widow, lest God strikes my last child. But when he is of age, you get married to him, and then he will procreate with you. So Tamar says, okay, goes back to her father. Now Judah's wife died and then became a widower. So in his grief, he went out with his friend Hira, and then wanted to, sleep with the prostitute. Meanwhile, Tamar was told already that Judah is grieving and then he's going, away, and then he was passing by. So Tamar covered herself, covered her face, acted like a prostitute, and then slept with Judah. Now, before the interaction that happened there was Judah says, may I come in with you? Come in means, may I sleep with you? Tamar says, you can't do that because you don't have anything to pay me. So what will I get in return for that? Judah then says, I don't have anything here, but I will send the goats and whatever to you. But in the meanwhile, for you to see that I have integrity and everything, take this staff, take this signet, take this cord. This will be my assurance that I will come back to you with a goat and give you that. So that happened, and then Tamar left and came back. So 3 months later, Tamar was found to be pregnant. Now, you were told to go to your father's house and be a widow. How come you are pregnant? Then when Judah was told that this was what was happening, Judah says, bring her outside. Who is that? Burn her alive. Burn the witch. Burn her alive and everything. But then Tamar says, to whom this staff, signet, and cord belong to is the man who laid with me and got me pregnant. And then Judah realizes his mistake and says, oh, she has been more justified than I am. So Judah acknowledges the fact that because he didn't give her Sheila. Meanwhile, Sheila had become of age, and then he refuses to give her to Tamar. That ended that chapter. The next chapter, chapter 39, says now we are back to Joseph in Egypt, who now is the slave of the Pharaoh. So the Bible makes a very interesting comment about Joseph. It says Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. It means Joseph was a fine man. So the Lord was with Joseph, but of course, there are some things that you will see forbidden, but you have to eat. Potiphar's wife thought that this was like the best chance to, get some fine blood into her system. Tried to seduce Joseph, but Joseph did not allow. Joseph says 2 things. He says, I can't do this because, not just because I will be going against God, but because I know that your husband has been good to me. So in fact, that was the first thing he said. First of all, it is not right because your husband has been good to me. Secondly, I'm a child of God. I can't do this. So, and then later on, when some men, the guards of the house were not around, Potiphar's wife decided to lie on Joseph. And then Joseph ran out when he realizes that, okay, she screamed and says, oh, he tried to rape me and all of that. The men who were now in the guard came back and it's like, oh, Potiphar's wife says, oh, this man tried to rape me. And then because she had evidence, which of the clothes that he had of Joseph. Now, when Pharaoh came back and then he says, this is what your so-called keeper of the house did to me, decided to lock him up. And the interesting part of it is that Pharaoh locked him up while he locked him up in where they put, so in the prison, there's where they put ordinary prisoners and then there's where they put those who have served the king. So Pharaoh still put him in there. Now he put him in there and yet he found favor in the sight of the prisoner, the prison guard, and then also those who were there. So God showed him favor. Now in Genesis chapter 40, the chief butler of the king and the chief butler of the king had a dream, and Joseph did so well to interpret. Now the thing is, they had 2 similar dreams, but the interpretation was different. Now, because of the wisdom of God in Joseph, because of favor that Joseph had, and remember, this is not just now, right? The fact that Joseph had a dream means he had the capacity to interpret dream, right? So it wasn't like he just sprung up on him. It's something that he has been doing. So he had the grace to interpret dreams. So when that happened, now when it came to pass on the 3rd day, when Pharaoh was having his feast, the dream that Joseph interpreted for the chief butler and the chief baker came to pass. One was killed, one was restored to his position. Now, when they were leaving, they told Joseph that, they were going to get back to him, but they never did. How he blessed them so much by interpreting the dream. They were happy, but they never did. And our main verse or chapter for today would be Genesis chapter 37, where we see Joseph interpreting the dreams to his brothers. Now, 2 things that I understood from that chapter was something that we already know. Where they tell you, it's not every of your dream or whatever you're trying to achieve that you should tell everybody. So there are two sides of it. These are the two things also that I learned. It's not everything that you should tell everybody, of course. We know that that's an established rule in that chapter. But the second part of that chapter that I understood from there is, what if you're on the other side where you have a friend or your sister, your brother, someone who is excelling? How do you interpret the dream? I liked how a man of God once said it, that how come Joseph's brother did not realize that even when Joseph said that, oh, your stars were bowing down to my stars, what they did not realize that they were also stars. He didn't say maybe in a kingdom where the king was the highest and they were slaves. He didn't say, oh, I was a king and you were the slaves and you were bowing down, and say, oh, I am a star, you are a star, but your star was bowing down to me. How come they did not interpret the dream also that at least they were stars? Although it was the barest minimum, but at least they were that. Although your friend can be excelling and you have this feeling, it happens with humans every time where we have friends who are excelling. But then we tend to feel like we're happy for them, but somehow we are wishing, why is it not me? Now, when you come to God with a prayer like that, God most likely does not answer such prayer because it's not coming from the genuine heart to excel. It's coming from the genuine competition. It's coming, not even genuine competition, it's coming from a competition that you have with your fellow brother or your friend, right? So you see your friend excelling and then you go to God, God, please don't embarrass me. However, that prayer is not coming from you wanting to fulfill God's will. It's because you don't want to be belittled before your friend. Also, you don't want to feel inferior when your friend is. So he calls us today to understand that there are some times where our friend can be excelling before us. God's time is different for everybody. We can be where our friends are excelling. If you have a genuine happiness, pray for them. When that thing comes up, you have to make sure you kill it with the joy that comes with genuinely being happy for your friend. I hope you learned that today.